Hey, how's it going? Good to see a new submission. Let's take a look at this guy. Just gonna look in Maya here today. Got some nice swinging, like a 4-swing attack, and a nice kind of return to an idle, which is cool. So a few things I want to talk about with kind of presentation and maybe the camera, and then we'll dig into the animation. These rigs, I find them really dark and hard to see a little bit. Something you can do to help with that. If you go to your attribute editor after you're selecting some of the rig and you go to the material, what you can do is if you go on the input for the color, so that's where the image path is going to. If you go to color balance, you can up the exposure a little bit here. And now we can see the whole rig a bit clearer. Sometimes you can up this exposure, but then play around with the color gain. If you want to darken it, but make it a bit clearer, you can play around with this stuff. But let's just go to here, and already it's a lot clearer for me, so I can see what's happening. I'm going to turn on this guy, anti-aliasing. What that does is it kind of smooths out bumpy lines. So you'll see like this kind of bumpy edge. If I press this anti-aliasing button, sharpens it up. Just a presentation thing, just because it makes it easier for my eye to see what's happening. Cool. And then another thing I do to help my eye as well is I'll make a sphere and I'll just make it ginormous. So I'll just make it like 9999, whatever, maybe bigger, 99999, more nines. That's too many nines because now our clipping plane isn't working. Let's take out some nines. Let's just make it really big. It just needs to be bigger than our scene. So that's fine. And we'll put that in a display layer by doing this. And I'm going to call it just background sphere. Oh, I put a plus in accidentally. Background sphere. And what I do is I set this to T. So you get these outlines. And then if I go on my camera and make the clipping plane a bit further away, I'm just going to add some zeros in here. There you go. I'll probably just set the near clipping plane up a bit as well, because it sometimes fixes some issues. There's a visual bug it fixed. Cool. So I've done a bunch of stuff there. And then the other thing I like to do is add a floor plane. So if I just add a plane and I'll make that big. So let's just make that 9999. Boom. Make that big. So we've got a floor plane. That way I can get rid of this. And something I like to do with the floor plane just to make it clearer and easier to see is I will grab I can do the same thing where I make it a T. Let's see what that looks like. Add selected objects. But I personally like to see the floor plane. I like to see when feet are penetrating. So if I quickly go to if I right click and I make a new material for it first. So right click, assign new material. Let's go to Lambert. And I'm just going to click on this guy and I'm going to give it a checkered texture. And I don't want it to be completely black and white. I'll give it a little bit of somewhere in the middle. Doesn't need to be as high contrast as that. Which is cool. This helps us see kind of stuff, but they're a bit big, these cubes. So the way to get around that is if you switch over to the 2D place texture and you go to the repeat UV. If I turn this up to like 25 on both these axes, now we've got like a bunch more cubes. Cool. And I'm going to add that to a layer here as well and just call this like background floor. I keep doing plus instead of underscore. Background floor. And then if I set this to R, it's set to reference. So I can't select it. Now I can't select it in the viewport. Cool. One more thing I could do to this. I'm just getting super in on presentation now, but I think it's nice to do. So I selected the sphere. I just right click selected the group so I can select the sphere again. And if I go here to the inputs, if I up the subdivision level, we can up the amount of these background things there are. Cool. So now what we've got kind of this scene where we can see everything clearly. And things are going to be, it didn't really tank my speed at all. This rig is really fast. It's a games rig. So things are still feeling solid to me, and now I can kind of see a bit easier. And I like to work this way. I like to be able to see as clearly as possible all the things. Cool. So let's do a couple more things. I think your camera here can be pushed a little bit. Looking at it, if I look at it, it's just the default 35 focal length. What I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the camera. So an easy way to duplicate the camera, if I'm in the camera view already, if I press Control, Shift, and C at the same time, what it's going to do is it's going to make a duplicate. So I've got camera 2 here. So it just makes a duplicate from the view that you're already in. So it just copies where your camera currently is. It's a good way where if you're in perspective, you can then play around with it and do it that way. Cool. So A couple of things I think you should do for this. I think you should up the focal length. What that's going to do is it's going to flatten everything. I'll show you what I mean. So let's just up this quite a lot. Let's just go to like 65 and zoom out. And I'm going to come round your character a little bit because I think more side on here is going to be nice for us. I don't want to lose any of the info you got, so I'm going to make sure that we stay out of the way, just making sure we don't cut anything off. Cool, that stays within. That stays within. And we come back. So maybe we can nudge it a bit this way. And obviously I'm a film guy, but we're doing games here. I like posing to camera as much as possible. I'm going to turn off being able to select geo. I've got a nice hotkey for that. Cool, so I think this camera is a bit clearer because we're more side on, which means the silhouette's going to be a bit stronger and easier to read for things like this, where you have like a gap between the arms and a gap between different things. Let me close my work chat. Oops. Cool. So I'm just choosing to do that. But you know, your animation's solid and you've paid attention to all angles, so things aren't broken, it's all good. Cool, so let's dig into some notes. I haven't put this in Sync Sketch. I'm going to just try and push some things around because I think the biggest thing I want to talk about, other than the presentation, which we've just gone over really quickly, is timing. So I'm going to select all your controls and I'm hoping this will work. And I'm just going to have a go at retiming. We're going to stay in stepped, but I'm just going to have a go at retiming some stuff because if you look at video game attacks versus reference, so obviously the reference which you provided, which was great. Love looking at this, very fun. But it's very even. It's very one swing, one swing, one swing, one swing. Return. There's no mix up in the timing and it's not very snappy. If you're doing video game animation, you want the attacks to feel snappy, and because you want the input from when the character presses the button and the hit to come relatively within a similar amount. You could have a really heavy sword, but the way that you're moving this sword around, the way that he's moving the sword around in the reference, it has some weight to it, but it doesn't feel like a huge great sword where it's like this huge, the body's leading and the thing's dragging behind. So for me, I think we can snap up this stuff because of the weight. If it was a huge thick claymore that was like, you know, this giant Dark Souls weapon, then we could talk about slowing things down. But then the poses would be completely different anyway because we would be compensating for the weight in a different way. So for this size of weapon, even though it is a claymore and it is, you know, relatively big, for the speed that the guy is using it in the reference, I think we can make it a bit snappier. So let's play around with it. It looks like you've got, you know, nicely keyed on all your keys, all of this stuff. So we can play around with it. So I like the kick up. I think I like the speed of that. What I think could be cool is if we 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Cool. You got like this is where your change is happening to the two hands. Cool. I see you. Cool. I think it would be cool almost if we add some more frames in the top here. So make the top and then we come out into the attacks, right? So the top is the hang time and then we come out into the attack, hold maybe, and then attack, hold or something. So let's play around with that. So we're going to go off the reference now and we're going to start pushing some things around. I'm going to hide locators for now, just so they don't distract me. I always struggle to find locators in this list because they're somewhere in the middle. There you go. Cool. I'm also going to change the background color maybe. I'm pressing Alt-B to do that. Blue might be a bit... I'm just going to make it so it's clearer. So if I go to General Editors or Settings and Preferences, here you go. So Windows Settings and Preferences, Color Settings. If I go to Free Views here, what I can do is I can change the background color. So let's make this a color that stands out against your rig. I'm just going to make it yellow and the bottom being blue is going to be weird. So let's make that some kind of dark orange or something. Cool. This is just me playing around. Now it's a bit clearer. Maybe I'll just keep it simple. Don't worry about that. But you can always play around with things like that for the presentation later on if you're doing like a play blast for presenting it for a reel. That's a way of doing it. For now, I'm just going to play with this light one because I think that's a nice amount of contrast. Cool. Let's get back to the timing. I'm a bit all over the place. Cool. So I want to hold up in this swing a bit longer and then I'm going to swing through. So let's move this up. Cool. So I've got all the stuff selected. I hope that this controller is selecting everything. Looks like there's some random things it's not selecting, but hopefully these are the things that you've keyed at least. So if I move this, it shouldn't affect too much. Cool. So I want to add a bit of hang time. So I'm going to add a frame in here. And what I'm actually going to do is I've got a hotkey for adding an in-between. So what that's doing, if I want to add an in-between, say in here, I'll do the hotkey, which for me is Control Shift and X, I believe. So it's just going to push everything back. So if I want to add more frames between certain areas like this, I'm adding more frames between it. Cool. So that in Animbot is this one, insert in between. So what it's doing is you can either insert or remove in betweens with this. I've got it set to a hotkey. So you can do your right click on Animbot hotkeys, and you can add a hotkey in there if you like to work this way, which I do. Cool. So let's think about this. I wanted to add a bit more hang time at the top, which I've added a little bit more. And now I want to make this bit a bit faster through. So I'm going to speed up some of this stuff. Let's start removing some in between. So I'm just going to remove one on each of these. So we speed up on the way down. And then I also want to kind of speed up through the attack until we get to the kind of end hold here, where you're going to have this moving hold going on. Which to me, there's a bit of information missing here. I think you're going to need another pose, another ease in to show this. So I'll just add an ease in. So the up down is a bit weird right now on that body. Feels like this should be continuing through into one pose. So it should just be continuing through to here. This down in here feels like it's not necessarily needed. I'm just going to get rid of it and see how it plays. So that plays a bit better to me now. I'm sure that there's some interpolation stuff. Maybe this frame would then need to be smoothed out to match that. But that up down in there just overcomplicated the move for me. So I've gotten rid of it. Cool. And we can snap this guy up. I mean, you could be really cartoony and snap it up a bunch. So we're moving from pose A here into pose B here. So the fastest point is going to be in the middle. So if we want to speed up anything in here, it's going to be this bit in the middle. I'm going to get rid of another in between in here. And if we really wanted to speed up, we could make this, you know, one frame through the middle even. That might feel a bit too fast. So I'm going to go for 2, I think. That feels pretty good. Cool. And then I don't think we need to hold for this long. I know he does in the reference, but I think for a game combo, I don't think you want this amount of hold at the end of your poses. So I'm going to remove a bunch of frames. Just going to remove a bunch. Cool. And then we're going to do a similar thing here where I think we can remove more frames. So I'm just going to get rid of 1, 2, 3. Just kind of doing stuff on 3s at the moment. And this is 8 frames. So I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe do it on a 4. And I'm seeing a few more places here where I think you have a pose to pose move where you're going from this pose, you're breaking down through into this pose, but then we're kind of holding in here. I think you just need another ease in here for that to be clear. See how that plays? A little bit broken at the moment. I wonder, I think it's the head space, the fact that the head is coming back so much. You'd likely need to keep that weight moving through so that the head arc can continue forward and not come back on itself so much. Let's have a look in perspective, see what's happening. This leg is stepping, but then our weight is going back. Instead of coming onto this leg after this leg is stepped, you were going back. So I think you're going to have to come forward onto it. It's going to help. Try and keep that headspace relatively clean. And we can push onto that leg as well a bit more, just so that the headspace is clearer. Hopefully you can see what I did there. So I was just looking at the weight and the head. So now, you know, you might then need to add a bit of connectivity with that foot, with the roll of that foot. I mean, you do have a bit here. Maybe that could be pushed a little bit more. Cool. So I did that on the ease in pose, but for now I'm just going to make the ease in pose the previous pose and then ease into it. So let's do that. So it's still a little bit janky because the up down is, you have this huge down in here and then you're going into this up. I think likely, I mean, maybe what's happening is the sword's coming through and that's what's pulling the body up. Might be overcomplicating the movement a little bit. So I'm going to grab your, I think it's probably your chest here. And I'm going to have that start to come up through here so that we're already opening up as we're doing this. Maybe we can have a little bit of ease just so it's got a little bit further to go. There you go. So, vroom, vroom. Cool. Cool, and that timing's feeling a little bit better to me. I think there's maybe the odd bit of a pose missing in here where the body leads the sword. Could be cool. Let's try it out. 4, so that's on 4. So maybe I'll add a couple frames in here so that we can continue on 3 since we're on 3s anyway. We could have like a hard ease out. So what's happening with the feet? Looks like we're doing a step. So let's maybe delay this foot back. I like the amount of roll it's got. I'm just going to maybe have a tiny bit of roll. Just going to cheat it on the toe just to get the idea across. And maybe this is what's stepping through here. So that can be stepping through, but the weight can be somewhat back because we're still doing that step, right? Steps and then the weight can come through. But what I really wanted to show was the lead or the sword swinging around or back around. Oops. So the sword, I'm not sure how you have this constraint set up. Here you go. It's this one. So it could be cool if there was a way to get the sword to come around. There you go. As the body's going back. So maybe the sword can come up and around as the body's starting to lean in, right? Getting some jank here. I'd have to fight some different parts. Right, this is my camera. I was animating to... Oh, okay. I'm animating to different cameras constantly. This is the camera I actually want to use. So I'm going to delete the other camera for now just because I'm flipping between too many cameras. Losing track. So I think it would just be cool if there was a lead in here where the body was, you know, starting to lead. The chest is sort of dragging it a bit. So let's fight that to try and get something just to show you what I mean. The hands would need figuring out. But it's just an extra pose in here to show what's leading as you're doing this step. See what I mean? I think that adds a little bit of nice weight to it. I think it's a little bit broken right now. It's a little bit busted. Maybe I'm counter rotating a bit too much. Cool, and then it would be great to see the push-off pose in here. So this foot as it's rolling off to its final position. Cool, and now since we're kind of animating to camera here to some extent, I'm going to tilt this a little bit just so we can see that sword edge as it's kind of coming around. I don't want it to get lost. Before it was kind of getting lost, like here, it's lost behind the body. I don't want it to get lost from the side view. So let's keep that around, and then it can slice around as it comes around. Cool. Dealing with these two-handed constraints is very difficult. So cool. And then, so what we've got so far, we've got a bit of a sped up couple sections in here. We fixed some of the easing going on in here. I think this is still a bit much. I'm going to tone that down. Just looking at this axis, see what's happening. Arcing around. Cool, cool, cool. Boom, boom. Cool. So let's look at this. Now I think this is a bit slow. So let's look at this. I like the anticipation pose, it's cool, but then we've got a big, I mean, there's obviously a lot more info going on at the start and we need more breakdowns to show what's happening here. But I think in general, the timing feels a bit slow. Like this swing through feels like one move, but I feel like it's getting stuck in the middle. Obviously part of that is because there's just not enough poses, but I think the timing could be snapped up to help with that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's maybe just try put this on like 5 frames. Boom, boom. Okay, I can feel that a bit more, what's happening. And then here, it's obviously lacking a lot of information. This just needs way more breakdowns to see what's going on. But the timing here is already feeling better to me, just with those small tweaks where I just push some of the keys close together. Cool. Nice. Let's look at some of this stuff. I think it's looking cool. I like this elbow lead on this frame, but I feel like the elbow isn't really leading the angle change here. This is in IK right now, is it? Yeah, so I'm just going to push that elbow so it leads. So before it was like this, so the elbow was going down, and then it kind of the lead of the elbow started to kick in on this frame. So I'd love for it to kick in earlier. So you have that elbow leading, that coming around, which feels nice and strong. Cool. And is this the elbow over here? Or is this in FK still? Okay, it's still in FK. Maybe I'll try and get it a bit away from the body just so that the arc is clearer. Same here. I'm just trying to push it so that you can see the gaps between the arms, so it's all a bit clearer than kind of what we had before. Cool, and I think that's reading a bit clearer now. Nice. So yeah, it's looking out for areas where you can push silhouettes. So here maybe shoulders kind of getting a bit lost. Maybe that means that we need to lead with the chest a bit in here maybe. Nice. Cool. One thing I thought about for this first pose is I would love for this to be straight. I think it being angled isn't as strong as it could be. So I'm gonna look for, I know you have that locator. Let's go into here and look for, is it this? No, it's the locator setup you had and some fun spaces going on. Cool. So for me, I'd love if this was straighter throughout this first section. I want to keep that bend clear, like that nice pose you had. And maybe if we're pushing for this camera angle, like just for presentation purposes, something like this feels a bit stronger to me than this. We're seeing a bit more of that edge and things are a bit clearer. I want to make sure that I'm not getting too broken in space. Maybe we could have the angle like that a bit more, but keep that bend. That hand is kind of getting lost right now. Let's just push that. Cool, so I'm just comparing what you had before, which was this, to this. So this just feels a bit stronger to me. We can see that sword clearer from that side angle. And the body just feels a bit more connected to it. So I would do that. I would do those changes through these poses here. I mean, you could do it with an animation layer and then bake it down onto those keys, or you could do it with the global offset before I did all that work so that it transfers through, because stupidly I didn't do that. But maybe what I can do is if I grab this, and did that locator have a button for it in the picker? Just gonna add one. So it was the arms and it was the thing. So let's just grab, see if this trick that I do sometimes works. Let's just grab up to where it kicks off the floor here. I'm gonna press global offset. And on this first one, I'm gonna go back to it. I'm gonna use Tween Machine and Tween Machine it back to the previous pose, which didn't work because I'm not selecting the hands. So let's select the hands. What's happening? These are the hands. Is it because this is FK? Oh, it's okay, it's this guy. So it's this guy. Just gonna select everything that could be involved in this move. That I might have just moved. I set a key, and I'm gonna go right up until kicks off. So up to this frame. Use the global offset, and then I'm gonna tween machine back to the first pose, and it still didn't move. What's moving it? What am I moving it with? That isn't changing. Am I not selecting one of the controls? Bit of experimentation to figure out what's happening. Is it this guy? Oh, it's because of the parent maybe? But what's moving this then? It's not this. It's not this. I think. Does the parent switch on the frame here? Doesn't necessarily look like it. Yeah, I'm a bit confused what's happened there. The parent potentially changing. But whatever, I would just try and push whatever it takes to get, you know, a stronger pose like this here, just so the readability of it is nice and strong. And we're always pushing for readability. So let's maybe look at another pose like this pose. It would be cool maybe if we had a stronger shape with it, and if it was clearer. I mean, this is more of a breakdown into this pose, which I think is a really cool pose. I'd love to see maybe a bit more lead in the hips compared to the chest. And we're always looking at these different elements and trying to push them so that we have these nice flows through the pose. I would love to get this straight for this step, because this kind of pose is super nice, and then you step down onto it. So you get this nice kick out with this lead, and then you're going to step onto it as it steps down, and your body weight comes through. So I'm always looking for positions like this where I can push that clear line for that pose. Try and make things as clear as possible. Drawing our breakdowns here. This is a nice pose. I like this one a lot. So yeah, I would always look to push my poses as much as possible when I'm doing stuff. Makes me almost want to hold in that pose now, but a bit janky because I haven't properly worked in and out of that pose, but hopefully some of the principles are clear. Cool. Here's another example of where we could push to camera a little bit more because the sword is getting lost. So if we twisted it so that we see the edge whichever way we want to go, probably this way because we're following through back this way. So I never want to have like the side on of the sword, like that really thin bit towards camera. I'm always going to want to push it around a bit wherever possible, just so that the readability is always there. Nice. Cool. So that's my biggest, because a lot of this is you just need to continue blocking. I think fixing some of the presentation stuff and then really focusing on pushing a couple poses here and there, but mostly it's just making the timing work. So what I did was just sped up some of the swings. So we're kind of keeping that nice slow build into the swing, but then speeding up the middle and then keeping the end bit and speeding up through each of your poses. I think that's going to get you a long way. And then it's all about pushing the poses where you can and making the readability as good as possible. So I know you haven't touched this thing. It could be cool to push that in certain places so that the readability, I mean, you're gonna have to do an overlap pass on it in the end to make it nice and flowy and cool. But it could be nice to think about how that is involved with the main poses that you have. So here it's really cool because it's out of the way of the silhouette. Here it's a little bit in the silhouette, so you know, just that little push like there so that it doesn't overlap that back part of the silhouette helps the pose readability quite a lot. Like if I compare, you know, this where the silhouette is the hands, the sword, and this big hair thing over the top of each other, just moving it around a little bit really helps the clarity in that area, because now there's way less things to focus on in that area, right? Like the visual information in that area is way clearer. If I compare that to that, there's way less things to focus on for that pose. And the other thing is, you know, having that sword tilted a bit towards camera, just so that we can see that edge whenever we're in a hold pose. It's good to see that clear edge. Cool, man. Hopefully some of those notes are useful, and a lot of it at the moment, I think you're doing a good job. I think it's just continuing to work through what you've got. Yeah, cool. Best of luck with it. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to help you where I can. Thank you very much. Good luck with it, man.